Before we start, I have one small request. If you're new here, please subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to like and share this video with your friends. Also, tell me where you're from and what time you're watching this video. I always love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Your support means a lot. It helps me keep bringing you more real horror stories. Alright, let's begin tonight's story. I was working late one night in my office, trying to finish a report that was due in a few days. I had some tea to help keep my energy up and was pushing to complete everything as quickly as possible. Staying up late was a regular need for my work, and I have always found it hard to stay focused once tiredness begins to set in. Anyway, as I worked in my office at about 11 p.m., there was a knock at the front door. I stood up and looked down the hallway. I could not understand why anyone would be at my door at this hour. I walked to the other end of the house and looked through the peephole, but nobody was outside on my porch. I took a step back and thought that it might not have been the front door. I was so focused on work, and was on the opposite side of the house, so when I heard the light knocking sound, I simply thought it was someone at the door I did not know. What else it could have been, but I just returned to my office and kept working. Maybe I should have been more worried about the nature of the knock, but I was so tired and focused on finishing my work that it was not even on my mind. After a few minutes, I stayed at the computer typing away for the better part of an hour. Nothing else seemed to happen as far as the knocking went, but I was getting much more tired by the minute. My work was slowing, and my eyes were growing heavy, but just when I was about to call it a night, I reached over for my tea, and right in the window across the room was a pair of A's staring back at me. All I could tell in that moment was that it was a man, but he quickly ran from the window after I saw him. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I just sat there with my eyes locked on the window. It was so unexpected I was almost in a daze. After a moment, I stood up and ran over to cover the window. I did not know who that was, or why he was looking into my house like that, but it being almost midnight made it all the more scary. I left my office and went to the front of the house, looking out the peephole again to see if they had gone to my front yard, but I did not see him. I then went to a window on the back of the house and looked around, but again there was no one out there. My adrenaline was pumping, and I was not tired at all anymore, but the now silence of the house was starting to scare me. Did the man leave, or was he still outside? I went back to my office and got my phone, then started making my way back to the front door. My plan was to call the police while keeping my eyes on the doors and windows. But as I got to the end of the hallway, I was met by a large figure, standing in the back of the living room. He was tall and wearing thick clothes to hide his identity, but his eyes were not the same as the ones I had seen in the window. This was someone else. The man did not hesitate, charging across the room at me, as I turned and ran for my office, locking the door behind me and pressing my body against it, preparing for them to try kicking it down. As they approached the door, though, they slowed to a stop and just stood right outside of it. I could hear them breathing, then starting to walk back and forth, like they were pacing in the hallway, but then I heard it again. A light knocking sound on the other side of the house. The man outside the door started to walk down the hallway back toward the living room. Then it was silent for a few minutes, as I stayed there against the door. There was absolutely nothing. I called the police, whispering into my phone and begging them to come quickly. I waited for about 5 minutes before I heard the sirens coming to my house. As they unlocked my front door and came in, there were no fights. I heard them walk through the house and finally up to my door, and they never saw either of the men. To this day, I still do not know how the one man got in or what the two of them were trying to do. I think the knocking was their way of signaling from inside and outside the house, but then that makes me question what the first knock was that I heard. The whole situation scares me every time I think about it, wondering how long the one had been watching me for and how long the other man had been inside my house. It could have ended up so much worse for me, so I know I got lucky. But it is hard not to think about the chance of them coming back, and luck is not what I want to rely on for my safety. This happened only a few months ago. I recently moved to a very small single-story house conveniently located near my place of work. I previously had an almost hour-long drive daily, so this move was truly helpful. The only catch was that I had never really explored any part of the area beyond my workplace, so it truly felt like moving to a completely new place. Anyway, this evening I finished work at 6 p.m. and drove straight home. I had to work again the following day, so I was not planning on doing much. Probably just relax and eat for a bit, then go to bed. I pulled into my garage and went inside, warming up some leftover flatbread in the oven. But while it was heating, there was a ring at my doorbell. It actually made me jump because I had not heard the doorbell before, but I had no idea who would be here either. I walked down to the front door and looked. It was a woman. She looked maybe 50 and had long gray hair. I opened the door. "Hi, how can I help you?" She smiled widely and said she had noticed I had moved in recently. We talked for a minute, as she asked about where I came from, if I had a spouse or children, and all that random small talk. Then she said goodnight and walked off. I never really had the chance to ask her who she even was, but I assumed she was just some older lady who lived down the block. But something about her, though, just felt OF. I do not know how else to describe it. But I was not sure if there was actually something wrong or if it was just because she was old. I went back to the kitchen and got my flatbread, then sat on the couch and started looking for a good video on a popular video platform to watch. I found some random commentary video to play as background noise while I ate, but only about 10 minutes passed before I noticed a noise from outside. I paused the television and listened, realizing it was a running car engine, but it was really loud. I got up and looked out the front window. There was a car parked directly in front of my house. It was running, but all the headlights were off. I looked down both sides of the road, seeing the entire street was empty with lots of other places to park. Yet, they had chosen to stop right in front of my house. I watched the car for a couple of minutes. But with no changes, I went back to the couch. A whole half hour went by with the car, its engine still being audible right outside the house until it suddenly shut off. I paused the television again and listened, not hearing anything else. After a minute, I got up and walked over to the window, looking out and seeing the car exactly how it was before, except it obviously was not running anymore. Again, nobody else was outside. It was just this one car. I shut the blinds just to make sure nobody was watching me for some reason. Then I went back to the couch and started cleaning up. But there was only a moment before a quiet thump sounded from the other side of the house. Already feeling a little on edge, I walked over to the hallway and looked down toward the kitchen. For a split second, I saw the shadow of someone walking away from the back door, as if they had noticed me and were trying to hide their footsteps. Quickly ran around the house, toward the front, and when I looked out the window, I saw a man getting inside the parked car, driving away immediately. The first thing I did was go to the back door and open it, trying to figure out why he was out there. It only took me a few seconds to notice that the handle on the outside was really loose, like they had been trying to remove it. Even just by pulling the flimsy handle a bit to the side, I could see the inner workings of the lock in the door, meaning he probably would have been able to unlock it, and he was only moments away from getting inside my house. I cannot say for certain if the older lady from before had anything to do with it. I know it sounds strange that she would, but I thought about the questions she was asking me, which all had to do with whether anyone else lived with me. Maybe she was gathering information to figure out if I was a suitable target for whatever they planned. It has been a few months since, and I have never seen her or the man again. For the past 10 years, I have led a peaceful life in the state of Olympus. I own a small house in a community where people generally live similar lives to my own. There is a village center for shops and other services, but most residents have homes or cabins located a few miles out, either with farming land or simply open lands. I did not do farming or anything like that, but I do own a large area of grassy land that borders some mountains. This happened almost 10 months ago. It was around 8 p.m. one night, and I was seated outside by the fire pit working on my laptop. I did this almost every evening, except when it was snowing. It was always a calming way to end the day before going to bed. But this night was different. I had been out there for an hour, truly focused on my laptop, when through the crackling campfire I heard something in front of me. I lifted my head, seeing a man standing on the other side of the flame, perhaps 15 feet across from me. The man looked like a typical person in his 40s, who lived around here, large and rough with a big gray beard. I rose from my chair. "What are you doing here? Where did you even come from?" I said, trying to hide the shake in my voice. The man stared at me with a look I would only guess was that of someone about to do something bad, but then he looked past me at my house. I kept my gaze on him. As he began walking toward the front of the cabin, he went up to one of the windows and quickly looked inside, saying something under his breath as he turned and started to walk away. I called out again, asking what he was doing and adding some unfriendly words, but the man just ignored me. He walked all the way to where the grass met the trees, and then he was gone. It was completely crazy. Some person being out here right by my house was no accident, especially not at this time of night, and the way he was acting was very strange. It was like he was searching for something and had no fear of walking on my land. I put out the fire right away and went inside, locking up the cabin and grabbing my gun just in case. I did not think he was going to come back, but I was not certain about anything anymore. As far as the police go, calling them out here would take far too long. To be a good option if something were to happen, I was on my own, as that is simply the way things are here. I stayed up for several more hours, well past the time I usually went to bed, and kept my eyes and ears open for anything. I do not recall the exact time, but it had to be at least 1 a.m., maybe even 2 a.m. when I finally fell asleep on the couch. I was trying my hardest to stay awake, but it just did not happen. When I woke up, though, there was an unusual constant sound, wind blowing through the house. I sat up, still confused and tired, and looked over at the front door. It was wide open. I jumped up and ran to the door, looking outside in all directions, but not seeing anything in the dark, I slammed it shut and locked it. Then turned around to face the chance of someone being inside my house. I stood there by the door for an entire minute, listening for any sounds of someone being inside. It was a small cabin, so even something like heavy breathing might be loud enough to hear. But it was dead silent, only the creaking of the wood from the wind outside. I slowly stepped through the hallway and into each room, checking every corner and opening every door, but nobody was inside. After that, I stayed up all night, and as soon as the sun came up, I drove into town and filed a report with the police, guessing that the man I had seen that night was likely the one who had broken into my cabin. The one issue with all of it is the reason there were a few odd things missing, which meant he definitely had broken in and walked around the house while I was asleep, but nothing they took was worth any real value. And of course they did not harm me either, so what they planned is still unknown. And without knowing why they came to my cabin, there is no saying whether or not they will come back.